Square Ball Podcast.
Well, hello there and welcome to the show. It's brought to you with West Yorkshire Electrical, and Michael's going to say some words now about West Yorkshire Electrical, aren't you?
Yep, they do stuff with wires, don't they?
Uh-huh.
Wires, renewables, roofing. They do that too. That's not electrical.
Not traditionally noted as an electrical service, but because they're doing so much stuff up on roofs, i.e. solar panels, specialists in renewables, as you mentioned, got some roofers on board, haven't they?
They have.
Part of the company, so yeah, they'll sort your roof out.
CCTV, fire alarms, all that sort of stuff as well.
Lights. Camera.
Good one.
Action. Phil Hay.
Yes.
Seamlessly brought you in there.
Beautiful.
Well, this is the view from the press box. What was it like in the press conference after the Rotherham game, 3-0 against them lot? You spoke to Farker. What was the general mood like?
The most interesting bit of it was with Rotherham's manager, Liam Richardson, because he did that great thing that managers do quite often where they say, I'm not going to make an issue of this, but... And then went on to basically call Patrick Bamford a cheat and to have a go at one of the assistants, who was... I didn't see this, but Richardson had spotted that she was having a bit of a joke and a laugh with Bamford after the game, which he described as unprofessional, given that, in his words, Bamford had cheated the officials out of a decision.
Are people not allowed to just find joy in their work, Phil?
Well, this is it. I mean, it wasn't quite on the level of Chris Wilder having a pop at somebody for eating after a game, which had probably left them fairly ravenous, but he was a little bit miffed by that. Having said that, that's not to pretend that Richardson was... in any way trying to suggest that Rotherham weren't completely outplayed or that it wasn't Leeds United's day, which it definitely was. As for Farker, he was very much as you would expect. There was a little bit of a nibble again at Leeds finishing because it could have been 7 or 8. And I think the thing for Farker is that he knows that if they have days where they aren't taking chances, he knows they're not a bad attacking team in any way. In fact, they're a very, very good attacking team, and they were again today. But he knows that there might come a day or an evening where they're 1-0 ahead, they've wasted chances, they've dominated the game, they should have won, they haven't put it to bed, and they get stung in the way that happens from time to time. And you can tell that that's what he's saying. He doesn't have any fundamental issues per se with what they're doing up front, and they are scoring a lot of goals. But even that was quite a hard sell to us, really. They were so dominant today. They bossed it from the start. A massive gap, massive gulf between the two sides, which I think is totally reflected in the league table as well. I mean, Rotherham just offered nothing right the way through. I know there were a few chances towards the end at 3-0 down, but he's a pretty happy man, and he should be. 6 league wins on the spin, which is not to be sniffed at.
Yeah, we are recording this on Saturday evening ahead of its release on Monday morning. So, we sort of said on the match ball, which you can find in your feed, by the way, video and audio. Leeds cruise control, really, wasn't it? It's probably the least, least emotional or erratic I've felt about a Leeds game probably all season.
There was zero jeopardy in that game at any point. I think the Somerville penalty probably told the story, which was just that Leeds have not been great with penalties this season, have they? And there has been this constant underlying theme of who's taking it. They're very much into the routine now of somebody picking the ball up, i.e. Bamford today, making it look a little bit as if they're going to take it, although I do think that the entire game is kind of getting wise to that tactic now, and it's not as if Leeds are the only side who do it, and it's pretty widespread. But then handing the ball off to somebody else who ideally sinks it, but there have been misses this season, and not just from Bamford. But that penalty, I think, told you the way Somerville took it. It was brilliant, I thought. I mean, Farkas said to us afterwards, he's very old-fashioned. He'd much rather that they were going for the corners. It's not really his cup of tea. But it was a lovely moment. And I just think it told you that there was no pressure, was there?
This generation is what really tickled me. Yeah.
Fantastic. And I mean, he's only in his 40s as Farkas. It's not as if he's, Roy Hodgson age at all. But he speaks from time to time, doesn't he, about this group in the dressing room of Somerville and Nonto and Rooter and others who are all obviously really exuberant, full of life and everything else.
Unbearable.
And I think they're making him feel... unbearable is probably the word, if we're being honest, yeah. And I don't think... Again, across football, I don't think that applies only to them.
I mean, Farker's a couple of years older than me, so I fully buy into it. I get it.
You liked that penalty, no?
I loved it, but I also thought, actually, in the aftermath of it, I thought, I bet Farker didn't fully enjoy that. He'll have to say something about it, about you've kind of... Because it demonstrates a cockiness that he kind of picked up in Jorginho Ruta earlier in the season about making sure you don't take the piss out of your opponents. Is it about keeping feet on the ground?
There definitely is an element of that, but I just thought it was an absolutely quality penalty, to be quite honest. It's not as if you're being nonchalant or overconfident by just sort of tamely trying to roll it in. It was the sort of finish that, unless the keeper stands on his line, and they so rarely do that. I always remember Silvestri saving from Alex Pritchard, I think, in a cup game against Norwich, where he'd studied Pritchard and he'd seen that Pritchard always went down the middle, so he held his nerve and he stood there, and Pritchard did exactly the same. And he saved it. But keepers tend to go one way or the other, don't they? They tend to try and guess. I just thought it was a really good finish. He's having a massive season, Somerville. I was asking Farker afterwards whether he saw this coming and whether he thought he was going to get this from him in the summer. And he said he hoped that there was some of this in him. Although looking at Somerville's kind of prior record, he didn't think that he stood out as somebody who was likely to have a massive output of goals and assists, but he couldn't have guaranteed it. But he was talking about Somerville, to use his words, saying he's very, very relentless in training when it came to working on his positioning and his attacking play. And I mean, he just keeps doing it. And I know he missed that chance in the first half that you'd expect him to finish. I wonder if he just had a bit too much time to think about it. But when he goes in behind, usually onto a pass from Rutter, the two of them just connect so well. There's just total confidence, isn't there, that he's going to score from the crowd and from him as well. Everybody expects it.
He's now looking like the player we saw in the under-23s, where he seemed to be far better than everyone and would score seemingly every game. And you thought, well, he's got to play for the first team because he's clearly far too good for this level. And it feels like he's doing that now in the first team. So whether or not he can do it in the Premier League when we get there, which we will, Phil?
Yes, I think he can. I think if you were asking me to draw a line between the players that I would sort of super confident would be okay or very good in the Premier League and those that you're not so sure about, he'd be on the side of the line which is saying, yeah, he'll be fine at that level. And also, I think, of interest to plenty of clubs. But Farke's in this great position at the moment of really having to decide who to leave out of the team rather than who to include. In almost every position, there are ways in which he could change it and he could mix it up. And there are very good players who aren't in the team and aren't getting a run. But it is, I think, picking itself at the moment. And I know there was there were no friends won by Bamford and Rotherham today, naturally. But again, 6 wins since he came back into the team. I don't think that's coincidence. I don't think it's purely down to him, but I think it has definitely been the right change at the right time. And it was at a point where Farke needed a change. Because I remember sitting in that press conference after West Brom, and you could just tell that for the first time, Farke could sense that there was a bit of incoming fire from the crowd, obviously, but also from some of the questions that we were asking. There was just that little bit of pressure because of the gap that was in front of Leeds to second place. But they were very, very close to going second for the first time this season at the end of a match weekend. Southampton dug it out against Huddersfield in the end. You almost called that, actually, didn't you?
Yeah, there were points in that second half. In fact, I kept messaging with you like, come on Huddersfield, good old Huddersfield, oh bastards, things like that. But it swung back and forth. But it shows they can be got at, and hopefully as they start to face more difficult opponents in the run-in, that will be brought to bear. Just on the stats for Somerville, 21 goals and assists, so goal contributions this season, out of the 55 that we've scored. So he's involved in 38% of everything that we do in terms of goals.
Yeah, and he's way ahead of his XG. Rutter is still the one who's trailing behind his, and I think where the definite margin for improvement is when it comes to finishing. And this is not to criticise Rutter, because he's clearly so critical to the way Leeds play and really creative in his own right. But the finishing hasn't quite been there for him. But Somerville there've been a few players. I think Farke, when it comes to man management and of getting, of maximising what you can get from players, I think he's done it well with quite a few. Somerville, obviously, Dan James, another. I do think we're seeing it with Bamford as well. It's not as if the goals are flowing at a massive rate for Bamford, but he has been scoring a few. He sort of quietly went past 50 league goals for the club last month, which didn't get a huge amount of attention. But we've written about him. We decided to for this game, and I just think more and more looking at Bamford, particularly after what he was talking about on his BBC podcast earlier this week that we touched on in the last poddy. It just seems to me that he's £7 million, and it's been £7 million well spent, hasn't it? When you think about it, he's kind of heading for a second promotion with the club potentially. It's going to be close. And okay, there's relegation in between, and you cannot ignore that. But, the season that went well for Leeds in the Premier League, he was the player that was scoring goals. He was the top scorer up front. I just think they have had the money's worth from him. And it'll always be they always feel kind of peculiar to me, this weird relationship between him and the support, how it's always sort of ebbed and flowed. And it seems like this endless story that just twists constantly with good periods and bad periods. But I think if Leeds do go up this season, they'll look at January, this period of 5 wins from 5 games, so 15 points from that, and then another 3 today. It'll feel like, I think, the period where they started to turn the dial a bit.
And right time to do it as well. Yeah. I think the relationship, do you agree, between the fans and Bamford has reached a degree of maturation? It's matured. There's a certain degree of understanding about we might know what your limitations are. That's fine. But what you're providing for us at this level now is more than enough. And the effect of him coming back into the team since his return from injury is noticeable. So maybe we've got a greater appreciation of that as well.
It's hard because he's just scored a load of goals, hasn't he, this year?
I feel like
if we were discussing this 2 months ago, we're probably having a different conversation about it.
But he's come in and done his job well and effectively, and he's made a demonstrable difference, and he's allowed Rutter to come back into number 10, which is what people were crying out for. As you said, Phil, the structure of the team now makes more sense to the eye.
There's another big difference with him, though, and probably the main difference, which is that he's fit. And I was looking back to the last time he'd started 6 league games in a row. I don't mean he'd started 6 league games in a row, but he'd started all of the 6 games start to finish. And it was 2020, 2021, the back end of that season. He did start some the following season as well, but obviously it crosses over the summer. That's a long time ago now. And I do think that if finishing has always been an issue for him, that's always been the stick that's been used to beat him with. And Bielsa never minded about that because he liked what Bamford did as a number 9. And actually, it was interesting listening to Farke today talking about Bamford and saying the same. He's the trigger for a press. He does X, he does Y, he does score goals, but, it's not all about that. And he is kind of important in that role. And, I think if you are missing chances, and obviously latterly the penalties have been a problem as well in terms of his reputation and his kind of stock with the crowd. If you're barely fit or you're not fit often enough to play and you're missing chances, then what chance do your reputation have? It's going to take a hit, isn't it? But I think now that he is fit and now that he is able to get through games, he's making a difference and he's become an asset. And I think what went on at the end of last season, you could easily have seen that developing into a situation where Bamford said, look, I feel like I've got to go. I need to leave and need to move on. I think Leeds will be pretty happy that he didn't, because he is proving to be an asset again. And if they do go up, he'll have played a part in that.
Yeah. Yeah, and him being here still and him being our number 9, if and when we go up, is a different question. But it's one to worry about when we get there, isn't it? It's not something we should be saying now. He's not going to be good enough for the Premier League this time around. Out
of interest, do you think he touched the ball? I assume he must have done on the basis of his reaction.
Yes,
and it was almost sort of. I know it's a bit bad form to say this, but it was almost wonderfully brash the way in which that was the most deliberate handball you're going to see in quite a while. There was no doubt at all he was flicking his elbow at it and sort of took it quite happily. But we watched several replays in the press room afterwards. Wasn't that easy to tell whether he actually got anything on it?
Yeah, Moscow was saying on the match ball that the stanchion from the opposite corner of the goal was blocking the view to it from behind the net. So you couldn't really make out whether he'd done it or not.
There was anything on it.
So we were happy to keep an open mind on it.
Yes, Phil. Yeah, why not? Why not? But on, as an aside to that, I think it was going in anyway. I don't think the ball wasn't going in. He's just flicked his elbow at it. But he said he touched it. He told the referee that he touched it. It should have been disallowed. The referee said to Richardson, I think Richardson said he'd asked him at half-time, and the referee had said, I wasn't sure if it was handball and I didn't want to guess, therefore I gave it.
Right. I thought it was quite telling that they didn't show a replay on the big screen because they always show replays of the goals. Yeah. And clearly someone in charge of the video desk took a second look at it and went, let's not show that one, just in case the ref's watching.
Yeah, he did celebrate with what was sort of loosely like the people's elbow, and wrestling aficionados will get in touch to say...
That's easy for you to say.
Yeah, sorry, I can't say that word, can I?
Aficionados?
We'll say that that is not the people's elbow and it's something else. But the fact that he was celebrating like that did make you think he must have got...
Yeah. I mean...
Even just the brush of a sleeve.
VAR disallows it, and obviously we don't want VAR back. VAR would have disallowed it. It would have been the right decision.
Would VAR have disallowed it?
Yeah, probably.
Could VAR have said conclusively that hit his arm?
They'd have had more cameras.
Yeah, it'd taken about 3 hours.
But either way, we were saying on the match ball, it didn't really have a bearing on the outcome,
was
did it?
very much Farke's point afterwards. He said he won that game anyway.
Even, what's his name? Is it Richardson?
Yes.
Yeah, even he made that point, didn't he?
What's his name?
I don't concern myself
That's
with
him, yes.
Ronnie Moore or whoever's in
I
charge.
don't concern myself with EFL matters, Phil.
I saw him before the game, Ronnie Moore. He was in the car park before the game. But yeah, no, Richardson was not trying to pretend that in any way it was a robbery of a game. You know, he knew Rotherham had been well beaten.
But yeah, on Bamford, it feels like this little run of games has been, in some ways, the key players are people who were not involved at all at the start of the season. In that you've got Firpo and Gruev and Bamford, and also it's a big 7-8 days for Nonto as well, because I thought he was decent again today. Didn't score, was a bit frustrated at times, but is making life difficult for people. Where it felt earlier in the season, when you were seeing him, you just thought, well, what are you here for? You know, he wasn't actually troubling anyone, whereas he's had a very good week.
This is what I was saying about deciding who to leave out. It's really difficult at the moment. You were asking whether or not you thought Roberts might play today. I thought it would be Gray, but I said maybe Roberts at Swansea on Tuesday night, and possibly that might be the change. You know,
well, you've been minded maybe to keep it as is, and then you've got him there as a sub, haven't you?
Yeah, but it's a tough toss-up, isn't it? Because there's not really any justification for changing it at all.
Like you say, maybe you see Gray going into midfield, which is the thought that I had on the previous show where I mentioned it. Like he seems loath to drop Archie Gray, even though you don't want to burn him out. But
that Kamara moment was fun, didn't you think, with Meslier? Where it just
we forgot to mention that on match ball. Actually, that back pass.
Oh God, yeah. Yeah, it was the far end. It was the far end to me.
It was right at the start of the second half, wasn't it? And I think we the little patch of us in the East End, we all kind of looked around at each other and went, "Did you see that?" You know, people were still returning to their seats, and I was like, "Yeah, it was a bit wild, wasn't it?" It was. I mean, obviously, you're alive.
Obviously, it wasn't deliberate, but it was if he was trying to put Meslier in trouble. You know, saying, "Catch this if you can." It was it was like excessively overhit in a weird position where Leeds weren't really under any pressure. But that was. I mean, it wouldn't be fair to say that was as close as Rotherham came, because actually there were a couple of really good saves from Meslier towards the end. But those saves that, even if they're really good, when you 3-0 up, nobody even really bothers applauding, do they? Just go, well.
And let's try and pick, if we may, or we can, and we are well ahead of any press conference pre-Swansea. What team do you reckon gets put out? Is it unchanged? It's hard to make an argument for changing it when you've won so comprehensively and at a canter.
And a lot of the players have had a decent bit of rest as well today.
He started making the changes early, didn't he?
He did. They've got. This is obviously Plymouth isn't, because it's an early kickoff, but this turnaround Saturday to Tuesday is nothing particularly out of the ordinary. If everybody's fit and everybody seemed to be okay, I can only really see, and I suppose it depends a little bit on where. I mean, even if Dan James is back, I don't think there's any chance of him starting. The only change I can see, I would say, is Roberts in for Gray. And I can't even think of a way to explain why I would do that particularly, apart from the fact that Roberts is really very good, and it might give Gray a bit of a rest. It might be a sort of freshen up. But Gray isn't even looking like he needs a rest, especially. So maybe it will be unchanged.
Yeah, maybe so. Pancake Day as well, Shrove Tuesday.
Well, there you go.
Big day, isn't it?
Is that a makes you think moment?
I've been looking forward to it for months now.
Yeah. Pancake topping favourite?
I'd quite just favour a bit of sugar and lemon.
Yeah, I used to do sugar, lemon, and
golden syrup.
Golden syrup,
yeah, very good. And then Valentine's Day on Wednesday, of course.
Big day.
Yeah,
looking
forward to that.
Hopefully, we'll come back and our hearts will be full of joy from winning at Swansea. Again, do we need to win this on Tuesday?
Yep.
Yeah.
Is it going to be the same for every single game? It's just so tight at the top, isn't it? That's the problem.
They need to set themselves up for this game against Leicester at Elland Road. That could be a massive tipping point. That I just think if they get through Swansea and Plymouth, do what they have to do, and well, then to beat Leicester at Elland Road, I think it's a massive signal sent south. And the fact is, until Southampton start backing off, and they came very, very close to dropping points today, but until they do, Leeds are still chasing.
Yeah. So who have we got then midweek as we travel to Swansea? I'm just having a look, just pulling the fixtures up actually. On the Tuesday, right, so let's have a look. We have Birmingham, Blackburn, Leicester, Sheffield Wednesday. You're going to expect it. That's going to be a home win, isn't it? Norwich, Watford, Rotherham, Hull, Swansea, Leeds, obviously. Bristol City against Southampton is a potential there, you think, given that Southampton have shown a little bit of weakness?
only if Bristol City are more in the game than they were against Leeds.
Well, I guess we'll find out what they're made of in comparison.
Ipswich are gone,
versus,
of course.
Oh, yeah, they're finished club. Yeah,
Is that
finished.
over?
Yeah. So West Brom Cardiff is the other game on
Ipswich are clinging to the playoff places, as far as I'm concerned now. Being as they are.
I was going to describe Taylor Swift on Twitter as a finished global superstar.
Were you trying to hoover up because you tagged Swift in that, and I know the Swifties are all over that shit.
It was a bit of an experiment to see whether people would actually, start the onslaught. And
did you not get like 50 blue ticks just replying straight afterwards?
I haven't looked actually,
because that's what happens now. You get absolutely hammered by spam bots, don't you?
Brilliant. Yeah, no, it was like a sort of social experiment to see whether people did wade into potentially the person on the planet who's least interested or bothered about Taylor Swift or any of that.
What's your favourite Taylor Swift song?
The last one that she released.
Did you like that one?
Very good, yeah.
Yeah, good. Huddersfield, Sunderland on Wednesday, just jumping ahead another 24 hours. Plymouth against Coventry, Preston against Middlesbrough, Stoke QPR, Millwall against Ipswich. I mean, we went to Millwall and comprehensively took them apart. I wonder could they maybe rough those boys up a little bit with Ipswich wobbling ever so slightly.
They need a win, Ipswich, don't they? Again, and I find myself saying this every week, but that was a difficult fixture for them today. But they're not really edging any of these, are they? I know they managed to beat Sunderland, which felt like a pretty key result for them at the time. But although they've taken points from Leicester and obviously got that late equaliser today, it's kind of not enough when Leeds and Southampton are going in the way that they are.
Have you started to enjoy this season?
Have you not enjoyed it to this point?
I have actually. I've taken the decision. It's been an active decision to try and embrace it more this season. I know there's a lot at stake, and it'll be shit if we don't go up. It'll be horrible if we blow it in the playoffs. It'll be horrible watching players that I like watching leave. But I'm trying to park all that and just say, look, that's a concern for a few months' time. We'll see, where we are in the shakedown towards the end of the season. For now, I'm just enjoying us being one of the best teams in the division that we're in.
I mean, I do really feel we are good enough to go up, and I feel like if we're in the playoffs, we should probably be favourites for the playoffs, even if we don't manage to get second. Because Ipswich had obviously the unbelievable start. From the bits we've seen of them, they haven't been particularly good. I know they must have been better against other teams, but I would have no real fear of facing them in the playoffs, I have to say. Southampton, I don't know. It was that weird game, wasn't it, the away one there, where Cooper was in the team. It was, I don't know, it felt like it was not a settled...
And Rodon wasn't.
It didn't feel like it was a settled Leeds team at that stage. I feel like when we see them again, we'll know a bit more, but that is the last game of the season. So they're the team to fear, aren't they, it seems, at the moment.
The only thing I've got against this season is that sometimes the disparity is so wide, like today, that it's not much of a spectacle.
You don't learn anything from it, do you?
No, and I think we're seeing, particularly at Elland Road, the same approach over and over again from visiting teams. And granted, a different approach would probably not make any difference because Leeds are so good and Leeds are always going to dominate. But it does feel a little bit like repeating the same kind of flawed strategy. And I don't think Leeds will be far off being unbeaten at home this season. I don't know if they'll go unbeaten. But at this rate, aside from your really, really top teams, i.e. Leicester and Southampton, it's really hard to see who comes to Elland Road and wins because everybody seems to be playing in the same way, essentially tucking in, hoping for the best and trying to nick something. But very few are actually coming close to doing that. And the reason for that is because Farke does have Somerville and he's got Rutter and he's got Bamford playing well and he's got James who's chipping in with a lot of goals, but then he's got the bench to use as well. And virtually every manager afterwards is saying to us they are very, very, very good. Very, very good, but they also have an extremely strong squad, which they do. I mean, I saw this going on Twitter yesterday, I think, where somebody was discussing, and I can hardly see the point in this really, but is Farke's football better than Bielsa's? Personally, I don't think it is, but it's not a slight on Farke's. I think this is a really, really good Leeds team. But what I would say is that I think this squad is considerably stronger, pound for pound, in the division than Bielsa's was. Yeah,
Bielsa's football was exciting and swashbuckling and almost reckless in its attacking abandon, wasn't it? Whereas Farke's is a little bit more pragmatic.
He had to make...
But maybe it's more effective in some circumstances.
Well, maybe. I mean, he had to make a lot of players who, before the ball was kicked in that first season, I'm not convinced that many other top championship, or clubs who consider themselves to be contenders for the title or promotion would have been all over. Whereas now, if you offered out this Leeds squad, every single manager in the division would take somebody from it.
We were just saying, actually, weren't we, between recording our podcast about Pirro, saying he's not actually played well for a while, but he'll probably get 10 goals this season, and it's almost the luxury you get of coming down from the Premier League that you have the money to spend, and if he gets 5 more goals than you would have got from Joe Gelhardt or Tyler Roberts or someone like that, who would be your other bench options, and it gets you up. It's ultimately a way of just brute force getting your way out of this division, isn't it?
I think I'm right in saying he's already got 10 goals this season, Pirro. And the other thing about him is that he is the sort of player who, in the playoffs or in desperate circumstances where you need a goal and you've got to score, he's somebody who might actually serve it up for you. You know, as opposed to what we were seeing. I mean, you'll remember the playoff defeat to Derby, Izzy Brown coming on at the end and having that free kick. And if that free kick had gone in, it would have been a great story. You know, it would have been absolutely perfect to have written about.
As
that.
the kids would say, he clutched it. That's what the kids would say.
Is that what they say?
Yep.
Well, I'll have to look that up later.
All right, Daniel Farker over there.
This is it. But that felt like a incredibly long shot, that, didn't it? Izzy Brown in his, you know, in all
a Hail Mary.
In all of the 30 minutes or whatever that he'd had on the pitch across the entire season, had that free kick in injury time to keep Leeds in it. And this is different. You know, if you had Pirro coming off the bench and he needed a goal, you would say to yourself, and I agree, I don't think he's been wildly effective recently, which is why Bamford's come into the team. But you would think to yourself, well, there probably is a goal in there somewhere. And if you get promoted, that in itself is worth the money.
Yeah, let's do that then, shall we? It's Super Bowl weekend. This will be coming out after the Super Bowl, recorded ahead of it. So if you are a 49ers fan, I'm delighted for you, or sorry that happened, whichever way that one
Are they in it, are they?
unfolded. Yeah, they are in the Super Bowl. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Cool. What's your favourite Super Bowl game, Phil? Is it
What, of all time?
Is it the last one again, like the Taylor Swift?
I'll go for the time Dan Marino won it.
Very good.
I don't know if he did, because I don't think the Dolphins.
Oh, that'd be good, wouldn't it? Somebody will be on to us soon.
Let me have a look. Let's find out.
Even better way of exposing my lack of knowledge about that. Yeah.
Let me have a look. Dan Marino, American football player.
I did actually watch a few years back the Philadelphia Eagles beat the Patriots in what I thought was a very good Super Bowl, personally. I don't think that opinion counts for much.
What was good about it?
There was one particularly impressive touchdown where I was quite impressed by the playbook they must have used for it, you know.
Well, let me tell you, in Super Bowl XIX 19,
Huge numbers, grow up.
Marino and the Dolphins faced off against the San Francisco 49ers and Joe Montana in Palo Alto, California, and basically Dolphins lost in Marino's only Super Bowl appearance. So there you go. Our overlords destroyed Dan Marino's.
Was I even alive? Having said that, I sat and watched that. What year was that?
It was X1X, I just told you.
Yeah, it was a good year.
1985.
Yeah, I was 4. Yeah, gutted. Yeah.
So is that our gridiron chat done for the for the day? Super.
Probably for the year, I would say.
Well, yeah, it's not back for another few months, is it now? So we've really got in Super Bowl on the peak.
Yeah.
So well done, lads.
My only memory of Dan Marino as well is that bit from Ace Ventura where somebody says, "I hope he dies from syphilis," which I thought was always pretty harsh, really.
Cheers, Phil.
And actually,
we'll pick that one up on Thursday.
Actually, quite a brave joke for a PG.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So on to Swansea. Actually turning up for this one. I know you.
I think I might do.
You bailed out on Plymouth.
Yeah, I think I might do. Particularly if the boiler's still broken. Cold house. Rather get cold at Swansea, really.
Heater on in the car. Right. We will speak later in the week after that game. Find out how we got on, and we'll preview. Who have we got next weekend?
Plymouth.
Plymouth again.
Yeah.
They want me to play them again.
Yeah.
It's outrageous, isn't it? We'll see in a bit.
The Square Ball Podcast.